Hello, and welcome to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. It is a bonus Kary Haun episode today. We're not technically going to call it Tourism Tuesday because if you're listening in real time, it's on a Friday and not on a Tuesday. But anyone who's listened for any length of time knows about Kary's love for Seven Bend State Park. And so Kary and I were together earlier this week. We traveled over to Mount Jackson to catch up with Olivia and some of the nesters at the Nest. And while we were there, we started talking about the new bike trails that are at Seven Bend State Park. So Kary said, hey, I know, let's get Kyle Lawrence to come do a show with Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. So good call, Kary.
Thank you. Yeah, he's somebody that we've wanted to get on the show for a while. And since the beginning of the year, I feel like I have been looking for ways to talk about Seven Bend State Park on your show, pretty much with every show that we've talked about. Even if we were talking about Mayfest, I was throwing Seven Bend State Park in there. Gosh, with their new kayak rentals, I don't know, maybe it's because I've been walking there every other morning, just really taking it in and the bird watching and the nature and all of that stuff. I'm just got big love for Seven Bend State Park. And when I heard that there were some new bicycle trails coming in, I thought, good, we get to talk about it some more.
So Kyle Lawrence is joining us. Thank you, Kyle, for taking the time to chat with Kary and I this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking about Seven Bends.
Let's start, though, with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. For somebody who has no idea what that is, give me some history and some background.
We have a history going back to the early 80s in the Valley in some capacity as a road bike club and then a mountain bike club in the 90s. In 2007, we merged those two clubs to focus more broadly throughout the Valley and also on trails, recreation, biking for transportation, greenways, a whole host of everything, biking and walking. So our goal is to connect people to each other and to land and place through trails, walking, and biking. So more than just bikes.
Is it a membership organization where I can join? Are you a nonprofit? How are you structured?
We are a membership organization, but we are a nonprofit. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We work throughout the central Shenandoah Valley. We have over 1,000 members right now, but we have a lot of folks in our orbit in our community who are not members. So no one has to join. We had a lot of great people helping us with a lot of great projects who may or may not be members.
And I'm guessing from your name, because it's not Shenandoah County Bike Coalition, it's Shenandoah Valley, you probably cover a pretty wide area.
Yeah, our historical roots are actually Harrisburg, Rockingham, but we do specifically Augusta, Rockingham, and Shenandoah counties. So some of our stuff stretches a little bit beyond that. We do a lot of work in the National Forest. Those borders and boundaries matter a lot less on National Forest land than they do in the counties, but we are explicitly working in those three counties and all the communities within.
Biking is kind of having a moment these days. There are a lot of people that are choosing to bike to work, like you mentioned earlier, and that are really taking up mountain biking or just riding for relaxation. I'm seeing a lot of that now.
Yeah, we think biking is a special thing, in part because it's so fun. It's this childlike connection, right? Biking is joyful. It's one of those things that gets people in and gets them hooked. But we also recognize that not everyone bikes, not everyone's going to bike. So when we talk about trails and connecting communities, whether it's dirt trails, paved trails, gravel trails, we think about all the people that are on them, right? And I think there's this misconception with biking. A lot of the greenways, paved trails, future rail trails, we see just regular people in regular clothes and regular bikes. And we always try to remind people of that. And so even the trails we build, a lot of times the majority of people using them will be walkers and runners and not just bikes.
That makes sense because the other part of biking is that you can do it at any age and be at any level and still enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a great lifelong sport and activity. And again, it's inherently fun. It's childlike. I think a lot of people connect to their childhood of riding a bike around.
A couple of weeks ago on the show, I had a gentleman who is working with Shenandoah Valley, Westminster, Canterbury in Winchester, Steve Policastro with Cycling Without Age.
Yeah, I
And
know
so
Steve.
apparently Winchester now has their own chapter.
Steve's done a bunch with Bike Walk Winchester, I think is the organization.
Right.
So yeah, so
That
Biking
was
Without
how I
Age
originally
yeah,
met him. He did the
it's a
show as part of
national
Bike Walk.
it's a national initiative and super cool.
They're trying to get now a second bike so that it's not just limited to Westminster Canterbury, so that they can actually take it downtown and
Yeah.
then be able to pick people up and drive them around the walking mall or in Old Town Winchester and or on the Green Circle Trail or any of that sort of stuff. So they're working on fundraising for a second bike, which I think is kind of cool.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad he's doing that. That's a really exciting way to get people out and experience the joy of being out on a bicycle, even if they can't pedal one.
And then having access. Kary had mentioned earlier her love of Seven Bend State Park. Having access to a state park virtually in your backyard has got to be a big win.
Seven Bend State Park is kind of a hidden secret for a lot of people still. It's one of the newer Virginia state parks. But for us, the accessibility, like being right in Woodstock and being right off 81, is phenomenal and unparalleled. So even though the valley has a ton of public land, we have some of the highest concentration of public land on the East Coast. Most of that is national forest, and most of the trails are very rugged and the access is challenging, right? If you think about some of the parking spots and things like that. So Seven Bends gives us this opportunity to have this really easy, awesome parking right next to town and some easy flat terrain at the bottom to get people into it or get on the river, and then more challenging opportunities as you go up the mountain.
What actually goes into making a trail? Is that something that you guys do? Is it something that the parks do? Do you work together?
So we certainly work together. And so this project was really unique because it was not only us and the state park, but also the George Washington National Forest. As the Forest Service has fewer and fewer resources, they're looking for areas to partner with other areas that could have parking lots and connections to their property and land. So the trail we built goes from the river at the bottom in the state park all the way up to the ridge top of Massanutten Mountain into the National Forest. And it then connects to this much, much bigger network of trails that are national forests. Granted, they're much more challenging trails. So one of our goals is to build more accessible trails whenever possible. This is our sixth large trail project on the national forest in the past 15 years. So we've been able to put about $1.5 million of federal funding into building trails on national forest land, typically with the idea of making them more accessible. So a lot goes into it, from environmental review to coordinating with the agencies to contracting the builder and getting them on the ground. The actual construction part is really the shorter, easier part of the whole process.
Ironically enough, the easiest part of it all, even though it's not just going out there with a bulldozer and scraping yourself a path.
Certainly not. We hire professional trail contractors and they bring very small excavators and they take them all up over the mountain and do some amazing work. It's phenomenal to watch them work. There's an art as much as a science. It's a light touch on the ground and it's done in a way that's incredibly sustainable. This trail in particular, if you get up towards the top and the rock that's up there, if you think about the Massanuttons, it's a trail that's going to be there for generations and generations. It's very exciting to put things like that on the ground.
How difficult is it when you have such a large piece of area like the park to map out exactly where you want this trail to go? What goes into deciding that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The planning is really one of the most important things, and the layout and alignment of the trail is what makes it sustainable and makes it check all the boxes that we're looking for. Primarily, if you think about an old trail, we basically replaced what was an old walking trail from what was Camp Lupton, which was the Massanutten Military Academy Boys Camp down there on the Lupton entrance, the northern entrance of the park. They had a trail that they walked straight up the mountain to the ridgetop many, many years ago. And that's the case of most of our legacy trails. So we basically closed part of that. Let's say that only was a mile long or a mile and a half long, but gained lots of elevation. To gain the same elevation on a grade that's not as steep and challenging, we have to build closer to a 3 mile, 3.5 mile trail. So that's the general theme of what we're doing, adding a lot more miles because we're building trails that go across the mountain instead of straight up against it. That makes it not only easier, more accessible, but more sustainable and keeps the water from running down it and washing away sediment and soil. So the sustainability is about the access for people, but also about the environment and about minimizing the long-term maintenance costs that could go into an improperly built trail.
And that makes a lot of sense because you certainly don't want to create something and then either have to maintain it at a heavy rate year over year or not. And then it degrades and it's not useful to anybody in 2 or 3 years.
No trails maintenance free, but if they're built right, they're very low maintenance. And the maintenance, instead of worrying about the water on the trail and the dirt washing away, we're talking about clearing trees that fall down, some growth, things like that, very manageable things. When you start talking about having to maintain the tread itself, it gets much more complicated and usually means you didn't set your trail up in the right spot.
You mentioned a second ago that you've built a lot of these. So you've kind of got that experience and education under your belt about what not to do, which is pretty important.
Absolutely. And most of the trail projects we've worked on have been west of Harrisonburg in the North River District of the National Forest. So this is our first project in the Lee District, which is up in Shenandoah County. And this project, I suspect, will get more use than all of our other projects combined because of the spot, because of Seven Bends State Park, because of the access to Woodstock and 81. And the primary use will be hiking. So they're not just bike trails. The primary use will certainly be people hiking on it and trail running. We're seeing a huge explosion in trail running popularity these days. So folks will certainly bike on it, but I think a lot more will hike and run on it. And it is a shared use trail like all the trails we build. So it's not just for biking.
And that's good to know too, because while I'm not so much a biker or a bicycler, I would be interested in maybe just walking that trail because sometimes that's hard to do in a park too, unless there is an actual trail for you to walk on.
Absolutely. And the trail has some distinct segments. So the goal is some of the lower parts are a little bit easier, not as rocky, not as steep. And long term, we're hoping for a phase 2 project and working on more loops down low, particularly connecting the two entrances to the park. The terrain is challenging, the topography is challenging. It's very steep as it rises out of the river. So we get a little pinched on some of these spaces, but really emphasizing trails down low. Part of this project was actually building a gravel trail. So a pretty flat, accessible gravel trail to extend the park's gravel trail network. And that trail is going to get way more use than the dirt trail because it's down low and it's this loop that people usually do. So it's important to balance these things and think about where the majority of people are actually using these resources.
And Kary, as someone who does walk at Seven Bend State Park every other morning, those kinds of trails are important to you because you wouldn't necessarily be on a bike.
Yeah, no, and I can say that I've encountered bicycles on the trail that I walk on, and that's really great because it just means that more and more people are using them for more and more different things. I just recently got a new bike, so I'm actually really looking forward to using that on some of the gravel trails. So I like the diversity of being able to both walk and bike. I will have to admit, I'm not much of a hiker. I don't love let's go out on a hike. My daily walks are just sort of like a fast pace, get your heart rate up sort of thing, and it's very flat. I am actually now intrigued about this climb that is not straight uphill, but a little bit more of a lighter grade.
Yeah, I think a lot of the hikes in the area, especially in the national forest, they lack loops, they lack viewpoints or spaces you're going to. So while we might have a lot of trails, they don't all get a lot of use and they're not always the right trails for what people are actually looking for. So that's what we're trying to work on at Seven Bends. And it's a little bit easier to do that in a state park, particularly because they have the staff and manpower and kind of the mission to have a more dense trail network than the national forest. So look towards some new overlooks in the future at Seven Bends. They already have a couple with benches. And some of the views down across the valley and through the river are phenomenal. And in the winter, when the leaves are down, this trail has views the whole way. It's
That's
phenomenal.
amazing. Amazing.
Let's take a break and come back and talk a little bit more about the trails. And maybe for someone who's listening that has always thought maybe they wanted to be that bike person and they've got some hesitation, maybe Kyle, you can give us some advice. Would that work in the next segment?
Absolutely.
We're on the Zooms today with Kary Haun, sort of wearing a tourism hat, but on a Friday for Shenandoah County Tourism. Joining her is Kyle Lawrence. He is with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. We're talking about the new bike trails at Seven Bend State Park. We're going to come back and do more of that in just a couple of minutes.
Wherever there's a need in our communities, there's a united way, improving lives so everyone can thrive. Where more people can gain access to healthcare and nutritious food for their tables. Where more community members can benefit from financial education and get connected to local resources for housing support. And where children are given more chances to reach their full potential. Community is where we find our strength and where we share our hope. United is the way. Visit unitedway.org.
Welcome back to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. We are on the Zooms today with Kary Haun for a bonus conversation. Kary and I are talking with Kyle Lawrence. Kyle is with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. We've been talking about the new bike trail at Seven Bend State Park. And Kyle, I wonder, Kary asked you this during the break about how long it actually took to build this trail. And that in and of itself was fascinating. But then you mentioned earlier that it wasn't any one person or any one group. So it takes a while to put this together, and it takes a lot of people, a community to come together.
It takes a lot of people. That's right. We started talking to the National Forest about this a decade ago because the National Forest doesn't typically build new trails because they have too many trails and not enough maintenance on them. And they have a lot of challenges with staffing and resources. So we talked about this over a decade ago. We applied for our first grant probably 6 years ago, didn't get it. Reapplied, probably got that about 5 years ago, and then had a couple of years of environmental review and kind of logistics and behind the scenes getting everything going. So that's why the construction itself was the quickest part. But in that process, you hire folks to help with the environmental review, help with the trail layout and planning, of course, help with construction. But then we get volunteers out there to help with the time because we use a federal grant for this and it requires a 20% match. So that match comes together through in-kind volunteer hours, some of the time the park can put in, and then also fundraising. So that's how we make up the difference in that match to come up with our 20% commitment. And so it really takes a whole community. And we're excited because this is one of our first big projects in that Ranger District and up in Shenandoah County in terms of natural surface trails. And so we're excited to build on this. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a phase 2 announcement relatively soon if it gets funded. And we'll be able to build more trails and expand on this growing group of people who care about the park, who care about the trails, and are excited to get back to public lands and create more opportunities for people.
Do you try to monitor or track how many people are using the trails so that you have evidence when you want to do a phase 2 of, hey, we've had this many people access the trail, or is that even possible?
We haven't done it there. For some of our other trail projects, we have put in trail counters, so like optical sensors along the trail. Seven Bends would be a good place for that. Seven Bends has counts for the parking because they charge for parking there. So they do have counts for parking. So they have more data than a lot of the other places that we are talking about. But specific trail counters would be really interesting long term to see what that looks like. There's a couple other ways to get data. A lot of people are tracking their hikes, bikes, runs on applications like Strava and things like that. So we always look at that and use that data. And we know it's just a sample, but it gives you an idea of the use. And there's some really great heat maps now where you can see which trails are most popular. And pretty typically, whenever we build trails like this, you see the old trails that go straight up the mountain get very quiet on the heat map, very cold. And the new trails that go on the contours get very hot. That's where everyone ends up on. So it's really interesting to see those dynamics where the trails that you build that are more purpose-built, not legacy, get most of the use.
It also speaks to just the use of technology. When you're talking about building it, first of all, like I said earlier, you don't just bring a bulldozer in and go straight out this trail. That's not how it works. But then at the same time, using heat maps and people that use the apps to track their bikes and their walks and their all of that sort of stuff. It's crazy how you can actually see who's benefiting from something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You could see who's benefiting, where they're going, what kind of things they're looking for. You could even see maybe the heat map is really warm up to a point and people aren't going much higher because it's either too steep or too challenging, too technical. And so then you can think about where some of your lower loops will go, which is one of the things we're looking at for our second phase, how you can create some more loops lower on the mountain, and also how we can connect up to the ridge at another location. So you get a big loop up on the top using the ridge trail. So our long-term goal is to have 2 built trail connections from the state park up to the Mastodon Ridge. We built one on this first phase, and phase 2 would build another one.
You talked about this earlier too when we were talking about anybody can get on a bike and give this a shot for the very first time. But that's also very important because they have to have a place that they know they can go and ride that is going to meet their skill level. And so having those lower loops and more flat areas is great for beginners.
Yeah, and in all honesty, the terrain again is pretty challenging there. So even though we built them as easy as we could, it's more like a light blue, like early intermediate trail than a true beginner trail just because of some of the terrain. But one of the things that we have going forward in the state park is that e-bikes are allowed. So electric assist bikes are allowed, which helps quite a bit. And the trail isn't too steep. It's more about the turns and some of the drop off in places. But there's a lot of switchbacks so that it's not as steep. And then an e-bike would really help with any fitness challenges that someone might have. E-bikes are allowed in the state park, but not in the national forest. But the national forest is about 2/3 of the way up. So there's a lot of trail that is open to e-bikes. So we're always thinking about access and accessibility. But if you're really starting fresh to get into mountain biking, sure, Seven Bends will get better, particularly if we can do phase 2. But there are other places in the valley, maybe not yet in Shenandoah County, but south, like Mastodon Western Slope and things out in the national forest west of Harrisonburg that have even better beginner mountain bike experiences.
If somebody's listening today and they're like, I've always thought that might be something fun to try, what's involved with getting started in being a biker of any type?
Our initial goal, if we talk about trails, is just get people out to experience the trail. So a lot of times a hike or a trail run is the best way to first get into a trail and then think that you might want to try biking. Most people who mountain bike already bike in some capacity, right? Because you want to have that balance and skill set. We have beautiful rural roads in the valley, particularly the gravel roads have been increasingly popular. Gravel roads are usually gravel because they have a pretty low volume of traffic on them. So that's a great spot. The valley is relatively hilly though, as we know. And one thing we're lacking is flat, long trails. That's one of the reasons we're working so hard on the Shenandoah Rail Trail.
That's my kind of riding. I love that kind of riding.
Yeah, we talk to people all the time who travel up to the Washington Old Dominion, the Virginia Creeper, or the Greenbrier to find these flat trail experiences. So we're still lacking those, but there are some great gravel roads to get on if you're looking for quiet spaces.
When you talk about e-bikes, I have friends that have e-bikes. The 2 friends that I'm thinking of in particular, Andrea and Shannon, I remember we were at a meeting and they both had ridden their bikes to Winchester Cap where we were having this meeting. So it was the first time I'd ever seen one up close and personal. And I remember joking with them thinking, isn't this cheating? This doesn't feel like you're actually riding a bike. And boy, did I get a whole education on how often they use the electric portion and why it's so great. And I think it's Shannon's bike has these big tires. And I said, why do you have such big tires? And she said, it's because if I want to take it on a trail, I can do that, or I can just ride it on the road. You can get one of those and do multiple things with it.
Yeah, the e-bikes have come a long way. So we have an e-bike. We have a long tail e-bike that can fit both our kids on the back and take them around town. And so we've had that for about 8 years, and it's replaced a lot of our car trips because it's super fun to go around. It makes it a more exciting experience. So we have our around town e-bike that can fit all our groceries on the front and on the sides and fit both the kids on the back. They've come a long way, e-bikes in every kind, and the proper e-bikes, particularly from the major bike companies, it really feels like an assist. It feels much more like someone has their hand on your back pushing you than it feels like you're on a scooter, right? And so the difference between moped feel versus actually pedaling feel is really important. And it's really opened a lot of opportunities, particularly for mountain biking. We do a lot on the Massillon Western Slope, which is private property, but there's public access, and that's open to e-bikes. And that's a really popular e-bike mountain bike area because the National Forest is not open to e-bikes. But you're going to see more and more e-bikes. You're going to see people getting to work on them, people mountain biking on them, people riding on the Skyline Drive with them, riding on our county roads with them. And it really levels the playing field and helps more people get into biking.
There's a new place that just opened in Mount Jackson. Kary, they were part of the Mount Jackson 5 in the first cohort, which is Valley
Trail Bike and Run.
Yes. And so I don't know if they're doing it yet, but their long-term plan was to be able to rent e-bikes for people that were visiting the area and wanted to take them into the park. That's going to be a big thing too. I think you don't even necessarily have to out of the gate invest in one of those if you can find a place where you can rent them and test it out a little bit.
That's absolutely right. And I believe there's also a business doing winery tours
with
in
e-bikes.
Shenandoah County with e-bikes. So it's a whole package. You get on your e-bike and you bike around for your winery tour, which is super cool.
Okay, Kary. Now we might have to up our game.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it happen.
I would do it on an e-bike. I would die if I had to pedal the whole thing.
I took my dad this year up on Skyline Drive for the first time on a bike, and it was on an e-bike. And I don't think he would ever ride on the Skyline Drive without an e-bike. And it was a really incredible experience. We were up there on a weekday on the southern section. It was very quiet. And it's amazing the difference being up there, seeing everything on a bike versus a car.
Do you have any advice for somebody who's thinking about taking this up as a hobby or as a sport? Are there things that you wish you knew when you got started that you want people to know before they jump in head first?
I think in particular with the e-bikes, I would just stress to go to a bike shop and try them out and make sure it's a bike that someone can service. There's a lot of really affordable online e-bikes these days, but they're not always totally safe and they're not always easy for other people to work on. And so there's I think there's a misconception. For a while, the e-bikes at bike shops were really expensive, but those prices have come down a good bit as battery prices have come down. And it's really important for any bike, I think, to have a local connection to where you buy it so people can help you out just with the bike, but all the other questions and things that pop up. So I'm a big believer in connecting with our local bike shops and having them help steer you on the right purchase, but also be there to help you with that purchase long term.
And you still have to wear a helmet. You still have to do all of the other things that you would do if you were on a traditional bike. You don't necessarily need all of the clothing, and that's probably why I would take it up, because it's an excuse to go shopping. But there are things that you should have, and then things that you can wait until you're sure this is going to be something you're going to do more often.
Yeah, helmet's a really good idea. But most of the bike shops, a lot of bike shops will let you rent an e-bike and potentially even use that rental credit towards a new purchase. So things like that are a great way to explore getting a new bike.
So if somebody is interested, Kyle, in learning more about the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition, do you guys have a website? Do you have social media? Where can they go?
Oh yeah, we're on all the social medias. You can find SVB Coalition, and that's our website as well, svbcoalition.org. We're super active with everything from group rides, group runs, all kinds of other events, trails, and that's dirt trails, paved trails, gravel trails, a whole range of things. So we got our hands on a lot of good stuff, and we're excited to get more people outdoors on trails in general, and excited for how trails can connect us to each other.
You may be surprised and have people reaching out to you from, what is it, Shenandoah River Andy Guest State Park, just over the county line in Warren County, because they've got a fair amount of trails there in that state park, and maybe they should be considering something like this.
They do. They have some built trails there. It's a popular park as well, and it is a little bit easier, more accessible. The terrain's not as extreme, so that's a good spot to check out as well.
And Kary, if anybody's listening today and they're looking for something to do this weekend, you've got a ton of stuff on your website that people
Yes.
can go check out to see what's happening where.
Yes, absolutely. If you go to visit shenandoahcounty.com and click on the events tab, it'll tell you everything that's going on this weekend and beyond. I've got the page pulled up right now. There is so much going on. There's outdoor concerts. There is music at the county fair, at the music festival, at Wolf Gap Vineyard. There's the Theater Shenandoah 1776 musical, Cave Ridge, Burn Barrel, and Bryce Resort. There's so much going on with live music and other summery events.
Shenandoah Valley Music Festival opens for their season this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's with the Little River Band on the 17th. Yeah, so check out their schedule. And I think that is, if you just look up the Shenandoah Valley Music Festival, or you could just go to our website and look up Shenandoah Valley Music Festival, and you'll see everything that you need to know, including their full summer schedule.
Thank you for spending some extra time with me this month. I appreciate it.
Oh, I love this.
Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like I said, I love talking about Seven Bends.
If you're still looking for something to do, maybe not so much Shenandoah County, sorry, Kary.
Oh,
I have to give a plug for the Monty Python Pub Crawl that is happening tonight in Old Town Winchester. It is raising funds for 4 or 5 local nonprofits, including United Way, Northern Shenandoah Valley. So that should not come as a shock to anybody that I am promoting. But there's a costume contest, you get special drinks, and there's a scavenger hunt to find the Holy Grail. And if you find it, you win cool prizes. So that starts at 5:30 at the courthouse on the Old Town Walking Mall in downtown Winchester. And Colonial Kids Day is happening at the Burwell Morgan Mill over in Clark County. Nathan told us about that earlier this week. So get out this weekend, enjoy it, have a great time, and I will meet you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of The Valley Today, just a few minutes after noon.